I was a lieutenant in the Jagdgeschwader 26 Schlachter, stationed in northern France. By the spring of 1943, we had already been flying war missions for years, and nothing about the air war over Western Europe felt new anymore. The same gray mornings, the same fuel smell, the same tension while waiting for the scramble bell. Our primary enemy then was predictable: Spitfires, sometimes Hurricanes, later the P-38 Lightning. We respected those. We had learned their habits, their strengths, their weaknesses. But there was one American fighter we didn't take seriously at first. They called it the P-47 Thunderbolt. The first time I saw one properly was over Pas-de-Calais in April 1943, during an escort mission for American bombers hitting rail yards near Saint-Omer. We climbed to intercept at around 7,000 meters, our FW-190A4S straining in the thin air. When the escort appeared, some of us laughed, not loudly, not openly, but enough to exchange glances in the cockpit. The Thunderbolt looked absurd. Too big. Too heavy. A fat fuselage with a massive radial engine, like something that belonged on a naval aircraft, not a fighter meant to dogfight. We thought it was slow. We thought it couldn't turn. We thought it was just another American experiment, a brute force solution built by engineers who didn't understand air combat. At the briefing room, someone had even joked that it looked like a flying fuel tank. That arrogance didn't come from nowhere. The FW-190 was still superior at medium altitude. Its roll rate was excellent. Its MG 151/20th cannons could tear apart bombers with short bursts. Against a clumsy escort fighter, we expected clean kills. Our orders that day were simple: engage the escort, break them off, then attack the bombers. I pushed the throttle forward, the BMW 801 roaring behind me, and rolled into a shallow dive toward one of the Thunderbolts flying slightly low and behind its formation. It didn't react the way a Spitfire would have. No immediate brake. No tight turn. Just a slow, deliberate bank, almost lazy. I remember thinking, he's inexperienced. Or stupid. I lined up behind him, closing fast. The Thunderbolt filled my gunsight. Its olive drab skin was dull, scarred, already dirty from months of operations. At about 300 meters, I squeezed the trigger. The cannons fired. The vibration shook the aircraft. Tracers reached out, some striking the enemy's wing route. I expected smoke, flame, something. Instead, the Thunderbolt kept flying. Then it did something I hadn't seen before. It didn't try to turn away. It dived. Not a shallow dive. A steep, almost vertical plunge. The airspeed needle climbed fast. My FW-190 followed, but I felt the resistance immediately. The Thunderbolt was accelerating like a stone. At first, I smiled. He was running. But then the distance between us stopped increasing. It began to close. At nearly 800 kilometers per hour, the Thunderbolt leveled out far below, pulled up slightly, and suddenly I wasn't behind him anymore. He was coming straight at me, head on. I had a fraction of a second to register the sight: the massive nose, the broad wings, and then the guns. 8 of them. 8 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns, all firing at once. The sky in front of me turned white with tracers. It wasn't a burst. It was a wall. I broke hard left. The canopy filled with sparks as rounds punched through the air around me. Something struck the left wing. Another hit the fuselage. The aircraft lurched violently. Back at base, when I climbed out of the cockpit, I noticed holes in the wing, clean, round holes, punched straight through metal that had survived cannon splinters before. In the debriefing room, no one laughed anymore. We had lost 2 pilots that day. Both were last seen diving after Thunderbolts and never coming back. Someone finally said it out loud. It doesn't need to turn. It doesn't need to climb. It just needs to hit you once. And that was when we began to understand. By summer 1943, the Thunderbolt was no longer a curiosity. It was a constant presence. The Americans flew them with discipline, not flair. They stayed high, above 8,000 meters, where our engines struggled and mistakes became fatal. The Republic P-47D, with its Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp, didn't mind the altitude. The turbo supercharger kept it alive where thinner air began to suffocate us. We learned that lesson the hard way. On the 17th of August 1943, the day of the Schweinfurt-Regensburg raid, I was airborne again with JG-26, tasked to intercept escort fighters west of the Rhine. The bomber streams were massive, B-17 flying fortresses, layered and methodical, like a moving city of aluminum. But this time, the escort didn't peel away early. The Thunderbolts stayed. They circled above the bombers like heavy guard dogs. They didn't chase us unless we committed. They didn't break formation. And when they attacked, they came down fast, fired once, and climbed back up. Energy tactics we understood too late. I watched one of our pilots, Unteroffizier Karl Reimann, a careful man, not reckless, slide in behind a Thunderbolt that had drifted slightly out of position. He waited for the moment. He always did. At around 250 meters, he fired. I saw strikes on the American's fuselage. Sparks. Pieces of skin peeling back. Any other fighter would have been crippled. The Thunderbolt absorbed it. Then it rolled, not sharply, just enough, and opened fire. 8 guns again. A solid second of fire. Reimann's FW-190 disintegrated in midair. No explosion. Just separation. A wing tore off. The fuselage went end over end. The canopy vanished. I never saw a parachute. That was when fear settled in, not panic, but something colder. A calculation. The Thunderbolt wasn't agile, but it was forgiving. It could take damage we couldn't. It could dive away from mistakes. And its guns didn't need precision, volume did the work. Later, intelligence confirmed what we already suspected. The P-47 carried over 3,400 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition. A pilot could fire for several seconds continuously. Against fighters, that was devastating. Against ground targets, it was worse. By early 1944, the Thunderbolt's role expanded. They stopped just escorting bombers. They came down to the ground. After D-Day, flying from hastily built airstrips in Normandy, they hunted anything that moved: trucks, trains, half-tracks, artillery positions. We heard reports from the front. Columns shredded, fuel convoys erased in minutes. I saw it myself on the 7th of June 1944, near Caen. We were flying low cover when Thunderbolts appeared out of the sun, already diving. Their approach was silent until the last seconds. Then came the sound, not engines, but gunfire. Continuous. Mechanical. Inescapable. They raked a road junction where our vehicles were dispersing. Trucks burned instantly. Men scattered into ditches. The Thunderbolts pulled up, circled once, then came back again. No hesitation. No concern for flak. Their pilots trusted the armor, and rightly so. The P-47 had a reputation by then. Engines shot full of holes, still bringing men home. Control surfaces damaged, cylinders destroyed, yet the aircraft stayed in the air. We began to call it Der Fliegende Amboss, the flying anvil. In the air, it boxed us in. On the ground, it strangled us. By late 1944, Even the bravest among us avoided head-on attacks against Thunderbolts. The odds were too poor. 1 second of their fire was enough. Our cannons hit harder, but only if they hit first. And increasingly, they did. The laughter was gone. The jokes were gone. What remained was respect and something close to dread. When a Thunderbolt appeared above us, we didn't think of killing it anymore. We thought of surviving it. By late 1944, the air war no longer felt like combat between pilots. It felt like attrition against machines, fuel, time, and nerves. I was still flying with the remnants of Jagdgeschwader 26, now operating from increasingly temporary fields in western Germany. The fronts had collapsed. Fuel was rationed. Training flights were rare. New pilots arrived with barely a handful of hours on the FW-190A8, their faces pale under their flight helmets, asking questions we didn't know how to answer honestly. The Thunderbolt was everywhere. Not just above the bombers anymore, but over roads, bridges, villages, forests. You could hear them before you saw them. The deep, uneven growl of the radial engine, followed by the tearing sound of gunfire echoing across the ground. On the 1st of January 1945, during Operation Bodenplatte, we were ordered into the air one last time in strength. The plan was simple and desperate: surprise Allied airfields in the Low Countries and destroy their aircraft on the ground. We flew low, through fog and smoke, navigating by memory and instinct. When we reached our target area near Ash, the surprise was already gone. Flak opened up immediately. Allied fighters scrambled. Among them were Thunderbolts. They rose heavy from the runway, some still carrying external tanks, and climbed directly into us. There was no elegance in it. No maneuvering for advantage. Just violence at close range. I saw a Thunderbolt take hits from 2 of our fighters almost simultaneously. Pieces flew off its cowling. Smoke poured from the engine. Still, it kept coming. It fired once, a long burst. An entire section of our formation vanished. Aircraft collided. One caught fire before it hit the ground. Another flipped inverted and disappeared into cloud. I pulled away, my ammunition nearly gone, my hands numb from the cold and the strain. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hatred. Only exhaustion. Later that day, back on the ground, we learned what Operation Bodenplatte had cost us. Hundreds of aircraft destroyed. Experienced pilots killed. Losses we could not replace. The Thunderbolts would be replaced. We would not. In the final weeks of the war, I rarely engaged them. Not because I didn't want to fight, but because fighting no longer changed anything. The Thunderbolt had done its work. It had protected the bombers. It had crushed movement on the ground. It had turned our skies into something we no longer controlled. When the war ended in May 1945, I stood on a field littered with burned-out aircraft and twisted metal. Among the wrecks was a Thunderbolt, belly landed, its wings torn, its engine silent. I walked around it slowly. The armor was thick. The skin was scarred. The guns were empty. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't meant to be. It was built to survive long enough to kill. We had laughed at it once. We never did again.